Victoria, what else did this inquiry find?
Well, this was the first ever inquiry in Parliament into birth trauma, and it really does make quite harrowing reading. Women talking about being left in pools of blood, of their cries for help being ignored, of being mocked and being denied pain relief. This one woman wrote she'd gone into premature labour with twins at 19 weeks after she lost the first baby. She wrote, "I was told by one of the consultants to stop my crying, calm down and try to save the other baby." He said, the consultant, "This baby was dead a long time anyway, so stop stressing and let's try to save the other one." So a complete lack of compassion. Now this came about because Theo Clark, the MP, had spoken movingly in Parliament about her own birth trauma.
I began bleeding very heavily after delivery. I was separated from my baby and rushed into the emergency room for surgery. I remember the trolley bumping into the walls and the medical staff taking me into theatre and being slid onto the operating table. I spent over 2 hours awake without a general anaesthetic, and I could hear them talking about me, and obviously it was not looking good. It was the most terrifying experience of my life.
So this inquiry is recommending, among other things, a national maternity improvement strategy, more staffing. Well, we have actually heard that many times before, and a maternity commissioner who would report directly to the Prime Minister. Now, the Health Minister, Maria Caulfield, did respond today.
The recommendations we recognise. Theo Clark's done a fantastic job in putting this report together. We're already implementing around 5 of those, so we're halfway through meeting the report's recommendations. The others we will look at very seriously. I know the Secretary of State has made maternity services her Year 2 priority of the Women's Health Strategy.
So, you know, on Channel 4 News, we have done many stories on failing maternity services around the country. We've spoken to many traumatised parents who've lost babies, families who've lost the mothers. And I think today there is a feeling that while this is welcome, change is still not happening fast enough.
Victoria MacDonald. Well, added to the troubling findings from that parliamentary inquiry, exclusive new analysis by this programme shows a dramatic fall in inspection ratings at many of England's maternity units. The analysis by our fact-check team reveals that 1 in 9 maternity units in England recently inspected by the regulator have been double downgraded. That means dropping 2 ratings on the Care Quality Commission scale in a single inspection. For example, from good to inadequate. Now, this was practically unheard of before the pandemic, but it's now more common for maternity units to be double downgraded than to get an improved, upgraded rating. And that's worrying because units that are double downgraded have gone from a positive rating to a negative one. Now, the Care Watchdog examined 131 maternity units under its National Inspections Programme from August 2022 to December 2023. 34 dropped by 1 rating compared to the last time they were rated. 15 were double downgraded, dropping 2 ratings in a single inspection. So 1/3 of all inspections resulted in some kind of downgrade, while just 9 maternity units, these ones in green, saw an improvement compared to their last rating. And the rest stayed the same or had never been rated before, so we can't compare them. And the upshot is that nearly half of all maternity units in that period were rated as inadequate or requires improvement. Now, the Health Secretary, Victoria Atkins, told us she's determined to improve the quality and consistency of care and that the government is spending £186 million more than it was in 2021, with an extra £35 million to come. NHS England told us the experiences described in the birth trauma report are simply not good enough and that it's working with local leaders across England to create and nurture a culture where women are listened to. Well, in a moment, I'll be joined by Donna Ockenden, who is chairing the review into maternity services at Nottingham University Hospitals. But first, with me here in the studio is Lauren Caulfield, whose baby Grace was stillborn at Leeds General Infirmary 2 years ago. The hospital failed to carry out a vital test which could have determined why Grace died. And the report into Lauren's case found several other errors were also made during her pregnancy. Lauren, so sorry to hear all of that. First of all, tell me about Grace.
So, yeah, I had a very standard pregnancy. I was midwifery-led care. I was pretty low risk from the beginning. I was originally living over in Leeds, but moved to Bradford at about 20 weeks. And that's kind of when everything went upside down. So my notes from Leeds were never transferred to Bradford, so there was a huge load of information completely lost. I was going into hospital in Leeds with reduced movements. That wasn't being told to the Bradford side. When I was going for my antenatal appointments, I was not having the necessary checks being done properly. So when they were measuring my bump, it wasn't being measured correctly as it should have been. My concerns about her movement were completely disregarded. I raised concerns on several occasions, was just kind of made to feel like I was an anxious mum who didn't know what she was talking about.
Yeah. And March the 20th then,
yes,
that was the day?
That was the day. So I went into labour and thought everything was fine, to be honest. It wasn't until we got to the hospital that they weren't able to find her heartbeat. And it was, it was the worst moment of my life. In that moment, I requested at that point a caesarean because I didn't want to go through the pain of giving birth. That was rejected by the consultant. I was told I could have an epidural. That never happened. I had to birth her, silently into a room of just pain and misery.
And up until this point, you thought you were having a healthy pregnancy. And there had been 2 reviews, haven't there? Because this involves hospitals in Leeds and Bradford.
Yeah.
And both hospitals say they've acted on the recommendations of an independent report.
I don't believe that to be true. For example, my placenta was lost by Leeds following Grace passing away. So we never managed to get any answer as to what happened. Upon speaking to somebody from their team just a couple of months ago, I was told they haven't looked into the system since. It hasn't been updated.
That was important, isn't it? Because you wanted the placenta to be tested to find
see
out
what
what
was
had
wrong.
happened.
Exactly.
And Leeds have said that they're very sorry about that, and that's another action that they've taken. But just when you hear all these other accounts today from women across the UK, how does that make you feel? It's
shocking. It's hard to believe that so many women across the country are going through such horrors. One of the biggest things I think resonates is the amount of women who feel they're not listened to. I think women are put in this position where they're not allowed to trust in their own bodies, and they're made to feel like they don't know what they're talking about and just completely disregarded. And then looking, at postnatal care especially, that's an area of huge concern for me. I know that they're looking to have 6-week checks as standard, but that's not incorporating bereaved parents.
Is that how you felt, that you weren't listened to?
I was not listened to at all, not during and not after. And I had no support in that after period, and that was so essential. And it's not given to women whose babies die. You're almost looked at as, your baby died, you don't matter, you're fine. But your body birthed a child, and in your mind, you are still a mum, but you're just completely disregarded by the NHS.
Lauren, thank you very much for speaking with us about that. Let's turn now to Donna Ockenden. You heard Lauren's story there, and all the stories in this really harrowing report today. What's your response?
First of all, I'd like to thank the more than 1,300 women and their families who've come forward today, and actually in a very short timescale, to contribute to this report. The accounts that I've read, and I did listen to some of them in Parliament, are just harrowing. And my heart goes out to each and every one of those women and their families.
And what the report says, this inquiry says, is that poor care is basically tolerated as normal. Is that really the case in 21st century Britain in maternity services?
As you will know through my work in Shrewsbury and Telford, and my continuing work in Nottingham, and actually in terms of contact from families around the country, I do hear an awful lot of accounts where avoidable harm happens and care is simply not good enough.
And you mentioned your review. That was supposed to be a turning point, that scandal at Shrewsbury and Telford. Now, our exclusive analysis tonight shows that several maternity services units have been double downgraded, fallen not 1 rating, but 2 since that time. So things are not getting better, do you reckon?
I think that progress has been far, far too slow. We need to remind ourselves that On the day that our final report was published, 30th of March 2022, the then Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, Sajid Javid, stood up in Parliament, we're just 30 seconds away from their being interviewed now, and fully endorsed all of the findings. They were immediate and essential actions, and we're more than 2 years down the line, and progress has been woefully slow.
Can I ask you specifically about units that have been double downgraded? Because that's now more common in recent ratings than actually improvement in maternity services. What sort of things have to be going wrong for a service to be downgraded twice in one inspection?
So I think that what the CQC would have to see is a very significant fall in the standards between one inspection and another. That does cause me great concern. Having said that, as well as speaking to families pretty much every day of the week, I also speak to midwives, obstetricians, neonatologists, anaesthetists and so on. And what I do hear is that members of that perinatal team, the team giving care across England, are exhausted. They're on their knees. We know that there's been significant understaffing in our services for more than 10 years, and the investment that has been required, we're not even halfway there.
That's what I was going to ask, because the government says it's investing all this money in more midwives, but is the current staffing level safe?
I talk to midwives on the ground pretty much every day of the week, and they share with me accounts of running from room to room, looking after a woman in room 1 and a woman in room 2 at the same time. Midwives have said for a very long time they don't have time to care. Health visitors tell me of services that are vaporised. They said, please use that word, Donna. Our services have disappeared. We're not able to provide, post-birth care in the way that we did 2 years ago, 5 years ago, definitely not 10 years ago. So I think today has to be the final opportunity. Government now have to get on and deliver. Because in addition to the more 1,300 or so women of today, there were 1,500 families in Shrewsbury. There are more than 1,800 in Nottingham.
Okay. Donna Ockenden, thank you so much for speaking with us. And Lauren, thank you too. Krish.